Welcome to Inside the She Cave, Trailblazers, Innovators, and Rule Breakers. I'm your host, Cindy Glanzrock. On today's episode, I am very pleased to welcome Lori Belilove, the founder and artistic director of the Lori Belilove and Isadora Duncan Dance Company and Foundation for 20 years. Lori is recognized as an ambassador of the dances of Isadora Duncan with her own special interpretation. Isadora Duncan is known as one of the mothers of modern dance and in our eyes, a trailblazer, innovator, and rule breaker. 100 years ago, she trained and danced with other women trailblazers, including Louis Fuller. As a rebel against the rigid academic dance establishment, she established a free-form dance environment celebrating women. Today, it is Lori who embodies Isadora's life and work as a dancer and choreographer. She has spent decades as a dancer, teacher, and choreographer, reinventing Duncan dance for the 21st century as a third-generation Duncan dancer who trained and danced with first and second generation.
You see, Isadora Duncan herself, she did all these dances. She was one of the first to put a kind of a political spin on some of her dances. They're very heroic. The whole group of dances that she did that are revolutionary. She even has a dance called The Revolutionary. It's a solo. These dances were very powerful and is an expression of a woman and women and people gathering their power to be forceful against things that they believe were injustice.
Lori maintains a studio and school in New York City, and I had the pleasure of sitting in on a rehearsal for their upcoming performance with the New York City Battery Dance Company in Battery Park on August 17th, a tribute to Ukraine, as Lori herself is Ukrainian. I am looking forward to their upcoming program at the beautiful Untermeyer Gardens in Yonkers on September 3rd, where the original Isadora Duncan Dance Company danced in 1932. You can see their schedule of upcoming shows at isadoraduncan.org. I have also enjoyed having the opportunity to see the company perform at Longhouse in East Hampton this past summer, drawn in by these beautiful dancers' soft and flowing movements and beautiful costumes. Enjoy the conversation with Lori Belilove inside the She Cave. Thank you. Well, it's wonderful to have lots of love today with Lori Belilove joining us of the Lori Belilove and Company and Isadora Duncan Foundation. You're third generation, I understand, Lori, of the Duncan dancers, which is a real tribute to you stepping up and deciding that this is someone you wanted to be not just associated and affiliated with, but flipping it so it's about the next generation, which is, of course, the Lori Belilove has your own company and you have your own dancers. And there was the Isadorables, which we'll talk about, the descendants of Isadora Duncan. Sadly, I know she had 3 of her own children from history that passed. And you've trained and danced with the first and second generation Duncan dancers. You have direct lineage and spoken to people. I know you spent time in Greece and met with a gentleman that danced with or knew Isadora Duncan and had a professional relationship. You were sort of an ambassador you became of Isadora Duncan, a representative. And there's so much controversy, which we also look forward to you sharing with us, of Isadora and other modern dancers, since there were supposedly 4 women modern dancers that are getting credit. And we did interview Janet Elber of Martha Graham, who, of course, Martha Graham was one of the 4. Louis Fuller, and I know a woman that's written extensively, Sally Summers, about Louis Fuller, knows quite a bit about her. And then, of course, Ruth Sandenis and Ted Shawn, which were, I guess, more of a couple than a woman. So we'd love to hear all about what you have to share because you're a wealth of knowledge. You're a beautiful dancer because I got to see you dance in Longhouse in the Hamptons in June and your company. And you're coming up, which is so exciting, doing a tribute to Ukraine, as I understand, next week, August 17th, down at Battery Dance Company. And you being of Ukrainian descent must be thrilled that you can share this with your people, your family, and Ukraine. So thank you for being here, Lori, and please jump right in. And welcome to Inside the She Cave as a trailblazer, innovator, and rule breaker.
Good name for things. Very good name for things because, I'm deeply moved by the opportunity to offer this tribute to Ukraine piece to a very wide public next week. It's a massive lawn and it's free. So it's a big platform stage. So it's a huge opportunity to raise the bar of awareness about the horrific war going on in Ukraine. You see, Isadora Duncan herself, she did all these dances. She was one of the first to put a kind of a political spin on some of her dances. They're very heroic. The whole group of dances that she did that are revolutionary. She even has a dance called The Revolutionary. It's a solo. These dances were very powerful and is an expression of a woman and women and people gathering their power to be forceful against things that they believe were injustice. This dance, I put together a framework of Isadora's revolutionary freedom dances, I'll call them, to the national anthem of Ukraine. And
wonderful.
It felt like a glove when I was in the middle of the creative process. And we embellished it with the voice of a female and then the large heroes that all fall and rise again. It's a tribute to Ukrainians in Ukraine and to Zelensky, who I consider a marvelous hero, a leadership hero beyond. I told the lead to just channel Zelensky when she's working with the big heroic gestures that need to happen there.
Who is the lead since I met your company at rehearsal yesterday?
Haley Rose. She's been with me since she's 9 years old. Just,
oh my gosh.
Note.
You don't have to reveal how old she is now.
Well, she's just one gorgeous beauty who's trained she's a beautiful Isadora Duncan dancer. From the age of 9, I spotted her in an audition. She toured with us from California to she's been to Russia with us. She's been to Florida with us and upstate New York and Jacob's Pillow and all kinds of places when she was younger. And then she went and had a big training. And then now she's with us as a full professional company member.
That's wonderful. So you have historical lineage already yourself, it sounds like, besides.
That's right. It's waves of generations now. I have quite a crop.
You explained to me that the sunflower is the national flower of Ukraine, and your grandmother was Ukrainian. And
my grandmother and grandfather, they both came from Kyiv to Rhode Island in America and started a life here. Came through the Ellis Island, the whole bit.
And they turned out a beautiful dancer. So tell us a little bit about a little history of you. How I know you said you were more of a tomboy, I think, than a Tom girl.
Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, I'll talk about that. Born in Berkeley, California, and raised there. My mother and father married my mother was in the Red Cross, and my father was in the war as an engineer. When they got married, they moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, which they felt was an opportunity for them to explore their free-thinking ways. My father came from a whole Jewish lineage, and my mother came from a Christian Scientist lineage and background.
Interesting.
And they chucked them both, sort of, those religions and those thinkings, to raise very free-thinking children, my brother and myself, artistic, free-thinking, exposed to everything. They went, my mom said, okay, age 12, Berkeley's getting a little rough, and we're going to go to Europe for a whole summer. We got a VW camper at the time, and we went through all of Europe, every cheese, every currency, every museum, every church. And I was just richly endowed with a world that I never left that experience.
Lucky you.
Ever. Lucky me, my God. And what a forethought my mom had to not have us just run around having silly summer experiences in her hometown. At the end of that trip, this is where my story about dance comes. I was always curious about dance, and I was very physically active. And I said, tomboy. I had pets galore, and gymnastics and all kinds of sports, but I hadn't really trained in dance because I didn't like it. I thought it was a little bit stupid. I thought it was a little bit shape-oriented, and it didn't have the passion I knew about life. It didn't have the depth that I was looking for as I lived life.
But did you have rhythm?
Yes, a lot. And my father actually, he played piano. There was piano and music in the house. My mother was a potter and a gardener. And we had many, many people coming through the house, college students who lived with us. It was a very rich family life. So when we get to Europe, we end up in Athens, Greece as the tail part of our trip. And there we were told to look up a man named Papalazos Kanelos. He was a Greek man, 75 years old or so, and he welcomes us to his home. There's artwork everywhere, books everywhere. He has big bushy eyebrows, and he's just extraordinary. And he starts telling us about his early life meeting Isadora Duncan when he sees the Duncan clan in Athens going around the city in their robes, in their tunics and Grecian robes, the brother, and they're at that time buying a home in Athens, just on a hill there, because she's decided she's going to live there. This is her pilgrimage. This is her world, Athens, Greece. At the time,
this is Isadora when she was in Greece,
right?
And she's free. She's free flowing.
yeah, with her family. And Vassos, a young art student, sees these people going around in Greek tunics and togas, and he says, his ancestors come back to life. He follows them and he meets them and he spends time with them. And Isadora teaches him some lessons and tells him to go back to his roots and to find what the dances were of the early ancient dances, to study some of that movement. He made his life in dance, and he considers Isadora his first teacher and inspiration. He went on to study with Fokine and various people. So I'm meeting him. Fast forward, he's 75. He's had a whole world of life in dance, and he has a stipend from the Greek government. He's so well known. He talks to us about Isadora Duncan. He says, I think I'm the last one living who's ever trained and worked with Isadora Duncan. And he looks at me and he goes, will you come study with me? And I'm looking like this. And then he says, I think, my brother remembers this better than me, I think you're the next Isadora. And I don't, okay, I'm 12.
Did you feel awkward by that? Or did you feel sort of like elated that he was putting you on a bit of a pedestal at that moment?
I didn't know who Isadora Duncan was well enough to get excited. Okay. We went home. I spent hours in the library learning who she was, who she is, what is her heart pulse and passion. And I went, oh my God, my soul sister. It was like a light bulb. And I had to know everything about her.
That's cool.
And at that time, there was no internet. So I'm writing letters and chasing down everybody who I can. And I write to Mr. Canellis and I say, I would love to come at the earliest convenience, earliest time I can in my life. I'm heading into high school. Of course, my family, you have to understand, they were that supportive. And before long, by the time I was 15 and a half, I was in Athens, Greece, living and studying with Mr. Canellis. It was like
you had a supportive family and you also had guts.
Yeah, the guts were first, and then the support was, I'm doing this. And would you help me? Hey, what about college? That kind of thing. I said, this is instead of college. I think this is an opportunity of a lifetime, and I'm thrilled. I want to work. I work with this gentleman.
So fast forward to the legacy. There's technique. There's Duncan technique. Yet there wasn't a lot out there in terms of film and photography of Isadora.
Zero at that time. Photography, yes.
Photography, yes. Okay.
And she had her own feeling about the moving image at that time. She felt it would going to record her in a shaky way. So she didn't want, she rebuffed film at the time. And she was right. If she had been captured on film, it would have been of a lower technology. It would not have captured her artwork beautifully because it would have been jerky like this and silly. And she didn't like the way the still photography of film was at the time. So she rebuffed it. She did photography. She thought that was an artistic medium, and she wanted to work with photographers in that way. Only at the end of her life was she ready for really engaging with a filmmaker. And of course, sadly, she passed away very abruptly and very quickly. We got very, very little. There's just 5 seconds of her
film. She died at 50. Which was 1927. And I recall that because also I studied a little bit about Louis Fuller, who was about 12 plus years older, who came before her, of course. And it's interesting because she lived till about 62, and they were a different age, but about the same time they both passed away, which was sad because, like you said, it was an early time, but she had such a full life in her 50 years, it sounded like.
Yeah. I call her a jet setter without the jets. She just lived life so fully. And I think that's one of her great contributions to us. Her inspiration to feed on life. And she went out of the dance studio, which was rather dry at the time, and she went to the museums, she went to the artists, she went to the poetry, to the literature, to the music, to feed her idea of what dance could be. Because she said, I dream a different dance, and I have to get my masters are Beethoven, Botticelli, and the Greek art, and the Roman art, and the Renaissance art. That was all her food. Because she wanted to get out of the studio, which was at that time very abusive in training and stilted and backward, for want of a better word. We know that the ballet traditions can be so abusive and not really encouraging a young dancer to be an artist, more a vehicle for someone else's vision. So Isadora didn't like that. She rejected that. And that's a very interesting point that I think she gives to now dancers today who need to continue to question how they're trained and what is the process. And it's really changed a lot recently, where people in companies, they are collaborative artists working. You know, that's such a different thinking than when Isadora was around. And you had ballet dancers still in corsets, all the gear and the tights and the constricted clothing. She went, take it off. Take it off.
Well, that's why I love history of dance. The history of dance, like I said, I keep bringing up Louis Fuller because she did so much with fabric and lighting, and it was much more free.
Yeah, she was an innovator herself, fabulous innovator. Oh, yes. They crossed paths, you know.
I mean, Isadora was promoted and supported by Louis Fuller initially. Yes, it was more than crossing paths. It was really special. I mean, I love when women support women. That's what I'm more saying, that, you know, trying to help. And then Louis was a promoter of a lot of women. I don't know that. I'd love to know more about, was Isadora the same way as you are with your company? Because I see you have at least 6 women yesterday and 1 man. So it seems like you're also a supporter of women, and I'm sure men too, but I'd love to understand.
We have been a female-only company for a long time, and Sam is a new member this year because he studied with me for years and years and years. He finally said, this is really what I want to do. Since age 16, he's been studying with me. So he has a Duncan aesthetic inside of him. And
what is Sam's full name? And I know he's going to be performing at the Untermeyer.
Samuel Humphreys.
He's going to be performing at the Untermeyer Gardens. That's early September.
Yes, September 3rd. Yeah.
September 3rd. And you had said that Isadora performed there back in the day.
Well, there's 2 parts. In 1920, Isadora came there and did some dancing. And then in 1930, Irma Duncan came with her troupe, which would be Irma, my teacher, and some of the dancers in her troupe, my teachers also. And they all performed at the Untermeyer estate at the exact same spot, which is the amphitheater, as a war effort.
Tell us where exactly it is. It's up in Riverdale area, because they're absolutely stunning.
It's in Yonkers, and it's adjacent to the Hudson. If you're at the gardens, you can look out and see the river and the water, and it's magnificent. There was a mansion. There was a Louis Untermeyer who had a huge estate. It's shrunken now, but the gardens are exquisite.
Yes, I've been there for their benefit, and it's just beautiful. It feels like you're in Italy, like you've just arrived in the Italian Riviera.
Yes. That inner walled garden and now there's more water flowing. They're getting the other pool renovated. So it's just been fantastic. We've been there many years now in a row. It's like historical dance in a historical setting, historical gardens, we could say. And it's my work plus Isadora's work. We're there every year.
It's interesting because you danced amongst the beautiful sculptures at Longhouse, which was in these free-flowing, you know, the costumes to me were, you know, so meaningful in that environment because of the colors and just how they flow and they move. So it seems like you like to be outdoors in gardens. Is that true? Or is that something that Isadora loved and you love? Or how does that come to be?
That's a mixed experience. On one hand, it's so inspirational and so incredible. You get wind and light that you couldn't control, which you have to just go with the spontaneity. So there's that wonderful creative element. And then on the other side, you have all the downside of, oh my God, you can't control all this. What's with the grass? What's with the surfaces? How are you going to get yourself changed or whatever? Where are you running to from one place to another? Of course, the weather is a complete unknown. And you have to embrace all those things and really hope. And Longhouse was quite fabulous in that way because it actually started raining at the end of the show.
I know.
Which was, if she held off until then, it's pretty great. But positives, and then there's challenges, let's put it that way. And we don't always love it. Now, some surfaces are not grass. And if it's really gushy grass or mud, we are sinking down. We can't get the elevation in the jumps. Likewise, if you have a cement or a mosaic floor or tile or marble floor, that is very hard on the dancing body because the landing is hard. And we really want a sprung wooden floor. That's our dream. That's how the body and the muscles work the best. There's, the surfaces lend themselves to challenges, and we don't do sometimes big jumping things on mosaic or tile or marble floors. You can't.
Well, I noticed the piece you were doing, the duet yesterday with Sam and Emily.
Yes.
That was, where is that going to be performed? Because that seemed like a lot of gestures, like arm gestures, of course, jumping too.
Right.
But a lot.
We are the Untermaier is a marble and mosaic floor. So I'm careful how I program, but that dance will be on there. There's enough, not heavy jumping.
And you have another one coming up at the Pell Mansion?
Pell Mansion, and that's I guess it's in the Bronx. I actually haven't been there yet.
Oh,
but
okay.
they have a mansion with beautiful gardens around, and the mansion will be our backdrop. And we're going to go there, sight unseen, the day of, scout it out, and decide where. And then they put the chairs, and we do it. And so that's got a kind of a tingle. Everybody's excited. We know the dances we'll do because it's a grass. We know what I know what I can. Yeah.
So that brings me to you revising and interpreting what was, let's say, just a gesture. Can you do an Isadora gesture, possibly, for us?
Well, there, you can't see me. The arms extend, the chest lifts. All of this lift, is such an expansive. These are all the upward gestures. Sometimes I call it a universal gesture when it floats up through the body and out up into a expansive upward reach.
So she seemed like open, like an open stance, right? Would you call it?
Really lifts, and there's breath, always breath. And then we come to the point of the reach where you might be connecting with somebody. Like I'm looking right at you here. That is our earthly plane where we're connecting with people. Then there's the earth, and there's the descent into the dark. And that's also hugely rounded torso movements pull you down against the lift up through to the light. Okay, so we can work at dark and friend, brotherhood, sisterhood kind of thing. And then the light. Yeah. Does that help you?
Yeah, I'm enjoying this. I'm getting into it.
Yeah, it's very pleasurable movement to watch and then to be a part of it. You saw some dancing. You just know what happens when you, as a spectator, you start to get an uplift.
Yes. And it is very uplifting. Mm-hmm. I was going to say Isadora versus maybe Martha, who can be, a lot of you're on the ground a lot, the ground movements and the contractions are like harder. So it's very interesting to see how the different choreographers such as yourself interpret whether it's war or peace or love or emptiness or sadness, and how they do that through dance and music, of course. I loved hearing Prokofiev. Was it yesterday?
Oh, the Prokofiev. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Well, I could say something about the Graham versus the Duncan vocabulary. You have also a component. You've got modern dance marching forward. Isadora saying that, hey, we don't have to follow all these rules. Okay. She starts late 1800s, and pretty soon a whole bohemian artistic circle gets wind of this modern work. And it's happening in music and the art too, and theater and literature. Fast forward, Isadora does her beautiful work. She even, she evokes Russia and that revolutionary work. And then we're in the 20s, and then things are shifting because war's coming. And by the 30s and the mid 40s, where Graham gets strong, she's dealing with a political environment that she has to address because she's a modern dancer. And anyone who's in modern dance, as in modern art, has got to address the world around them. It starts to sharpen. It starts to get angular. The angst comes. You think about World War I, it's a horrific thing that happened. Everybody's responding to all of that. Does that help you to understand why the movements start to shift?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you have to infuse it with whoever you are, right, as the choreographer.
Absolutely. That's the whole point of dance and the whole point of modern dance. Cultivate an authentic sense of self as you move, as opposed to just being a puppet for someone else, where you don't get to speak or something like that, and you just are a dancer within a production.
I noticed yesterday when some of them were having facial expressions, you said no facial expression. And maybe I misunderstood it, so you can correct me, of course.
Oh, sure. Good question.
I don't know. Maybe you're supposed to, because I know some dancers at Graham versus Alvin Ailey versus Mark Morris, all the different modern, some are faceless and some actually have beautiful, when you go to classical ballet, they're sometimes smiling. And I always wondered, is that part of the choreography? So please
Of
do
course.
share.
Well, you've got the theme of the dance, and that'll put on an actor expression that you need to complement with the movement. So how you expect, if I had a shit-eating grin on my face while I'm doing a very dark movement, it just wouldn't compute. It wouldn't compute for me and my body, and it also wouldn't compute to the audience. So these things go hand in hand, and we train for that. You understand what the depth of the dance is about, so we can begin to make the expression connect with the dance itself, what it's all about. Now, when you're learning, we know that we have many, many facial habits as you're learning how to type or some twisted, you might do twisted things as you are learning something. So there's that component. So that's why I said to this one dancer who has a habit of sort of censor yourself. She was correcting herself internally as she's learning and working on the choreography. So it came out with a kind of thing that she was doing. So I asked her to take that away so she could be a little bit more open to possibly mistakes and possibly learning, but not practicing that face because it's not part of the dance, if that makes sense. And sometimes in our progress of learning, it doesn't happen so naturally. You need to actually practice the expression that's going to go along with the given dance.
So the face doesn't become the dance becomes the face. So meaning what your movement is what's supposed to be expressed or not expressed, but basically.
Well, the whole body, one whole package. We even we choreograph the eyes, the opposition, the way the eyes work. And that's where you get a huge reading of clarity of what are the movements. So the eyes, the face, everything are all connected to a larger dancing whole.
I've done a lot of studying on the body versus the face and how important that is.
Yeah.
And I know I just loved even watching you choreograph, like seeing your facial expressions and you breathing or not breathing when they're doing something.
Yeah. So I do try to help them get in tune with their face as they're working the hard steps and movements. So that's in the training process and the choreographic rehearsal process, shall we say, to get closer to what the dance is all about. Tip to toe. Tip to toe.
Tip to toe. I saw quite a bit of, these wonderful sort of interactions amongst, the company, and there's relationships that maybe happen, some more than others, some connections between dancers better than others. I was just curious to go back to Isadora's Isadorables. And did you reflect on that and their relationships? Or obviously, many of these, whether it's, again, I mentioned Louis.
I should clarify something for you.
Please.
I'm born in Berkeley. I met and got exposed to Isadora, her ideas and her dance. I studied it, but I don't think of myself as Isadora. I don't think of myself as I need to imitate her lifestyle or any number of things. I'm unto myself, shall we say. I love her work and I respect her philosophy and her thinking, especially her teaching of children is incredible. And I've adopted a whole training program, thereby, using the movement or the philosophy. But to emulate many of her things in her life, no, that's okay. She's unto herself. She made her own mistakes. She's her own complicated, early, young, modern woman. I'm my own modern woman. And I have made my own choices about what is aesthetic and how I live my life and blah, blah, blah. And I don't necessarily try to emulate.
But you chose to take on the name, and it's what starts in your title, Isadora Duncan. Right? That's a brand, it's a title, it's representative. We always think of the person who's taking on that. It's a heavy responsibility in some respects, and or you could say no, but I'd say if I was going to be the Queen Elizabeth dance company and by Cindy Glanzrock, I would oh my gosh, there's such lineage, heritage, tradition. There are people that loved her, there are people that didn't love her. So you are taking it on your shoulders a bit. I mean, you're not her.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah. I guess make a separation at the same time. I embrace many of philosophical principles she offered aesthetically and artistically. I embrace those very fully. But there comes a point of separation where Lori has her own lover choices and her own what she wears, or I consider myself a contemporary. Who knows what Isadora would have been doing now? And in some ways, I don't care. I just love. She gave us so much riches about who women can be. And she did her best. She signed contracts. She owned property way ahead of, she dressed the way she wanted to dress. She loved who she wanted to love. This is gorgeous. Doesn't get much better than that. And so an Isadorian feel is something we all fall on her coattails and then be our own persons, our own selves.
Just in terms of highlights of the repertoire, including some of the well-known dances, both Isadora's historically dances and yourself, how you've taken them on and again reinterpreted. You know, I was familiar with Dance of the Furies, so I wanted to ask you that. Or speaking of the other one that's sort of a classic was the Strauss Waltz, Blue Danube. So taking classic names or classic music, even though it's modern dance, I wanted you to explain that and how that all works and how then you have taken that forward, just because I know she danced in Budapest, Hungary, and so have you. So just to give me a little of that lineage and history and how that's worked for you and how you've used that to your, you know, in developing your company.
I hear a few questions here. One is the classic Isadora repertoire and how that came to be, because she chose classical music for a few reasons. One is she was very familiar with it because her mother was a classical piano teacher. So she grew up with this piano in her daily life. She slept under the piano sometimes when she curled under while there were lessons going on. And they were teaching at that time all the classic Chopin, Schubert, Brahms, Beethoven, like classical repertoire. Learned a lot of that in her young life. So immediately she choreographs to that. Then when she's dancing these pieces, let's say a Chopin waltz or a Strauss waltz, people are up in arms because, wait a minute, this is classical music. You sit in a salon concert hall and you listen. You do not dance. This is verboten. And she went ahead and did it anyway. And she said to the public, she said, okay, come see what I do, how I interpret, let's say, a Chopin or a Schubert waltz or sonata or concerto. And if you don't appreciate my interpretation, shall we say, she said, you're free to leave. It's okay. But most people ended up weeping because her musicality, she was intrinsically musical, evolved this gorgeous movement vocabulary that really expanded the classical music without stepping on it. So that was a big hurdle, and that's all the moderns now do classical music. And following that same tradition, I also choose contemporary classical music for the most part for my repertoire. But then someone asked me, what kind of music do you choose? I said, good music you could dance to, or music that evokes some theme that I'm working on choreographing.
You've reinterpreted because that's actual choreography, and then you traveled to some of the same countries she danced in, such as Hungary and Budapest, and the company has traveled all over the world from what I understand.
Yes.
So have you gone back to the same places and danced the same dances for a reason, for tradition?
Nostalgia purposes, we've gone to some of the same theaters and spaces there where she's performed or lived. Homage or pilgrimage, shall we say. Famous place is the Urania Theater in Budapest. And that there was a festival. They invited us back and invited me specifically to do a solo concert there to embrace Isadora. It was like 100 years. 1902 was when she made that Blue Danube debut. And then I did it in 2002, I think it was. Exactly 100 years. So it was really fun.
And also the costume, the lighting, and the props or the staging. I know, when obviously Martha Graham, worked with Noguchi and Louis Fuller, had the incredible lighting that she was famous for her lighting and staging. And then, of course, Ruth Saint-Denis did their own sort of form of interpretation with lighting, costumes, and staging. How about Isadora, and how have you interpreted differently or kept what she's done? Just to share that with us.
Isadora's idea was to strip away all the theatricalities. And she pared down, of course, the costume. We know that, down to bare skin and legs, a lot of headdress and things like that. Think of the ballet russe. You've got, if they want to interpret the bacchanal, they put grapes on the dancers, and hung grapes all over themselves. Isadora didn't want any of that. She wanted to really evoke the imagination in a more modern, abstract way. So she put blue curtains behind. That's what she traveled with, and a greenish carpet. And she had footlights. That was it. But she knew what she wanted. It actually evoked a very simplistic approach. So she was the center. She was what people were looking at, not all of the theatrical stuff and costumes and lighting and things like that. So that was a conscious effort on Isadora's part. She writes a lot about it. Very few.
But she seemed to take from her days with Louis Fuller, the concept of using silks to drape yourself in those clothes. And
I think that's a misunderstanding. Isadora had silks and fabrics way before Louis Fuller. And she was, her mother took curtains and made one of her first outfits way before Louis Fuller's connection with Isadora. Yeah, she went on to drape
I know Sally Summers, who's the historian who wrote about Louis, says something completely differently than you. So I'm learning now how there's so many different.
But Louis, who knows these women? We don't know for sure. But as I knew, Isadora very early was doing drapery. So who crossed over where? I don't claim anything. It doesn't matter to me at all.
I just love the story about the looms in Lyon, France, that had to be made larger because the amount of the silk that they were creating, hundreds of yards of silk for these costumes during the days of Louis Fuller. So she was famous for the silk draping costumes.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to give credit where credit is due. You know, that's often what I think sometimes doesn't happen in whether it's the dance world, the art world, the fashion world, because of the competition also amongst women.
I'm going to look into that, Cindy, because it's curiosity to me.
I so appreciate, hearing what you're up to and what you're doing and having heard about you and then seeing you dance and then coming to your rehearsal studio. And I know we're in a rehearsal studio of yours right now. So thank you for allowing us into your space. Your ﷺ.
No dancers here today.
No dancers. But I know you work very hard with your team to make sure that, that things are done, even though they have their own personal interpretations. It sounds like you allow them that.
Of course.
But
I'm looking
to have their
artistry as we work. Absolutely.
Well, I thank you. And any words or pearls to share, since you are, like I said, you're an innovator. And what about young girls or maybe women, the more mature, about dance and having dance in your life and why that's important to you and maybe to others, perhaps.
On that point,
share that with us before we leave you.
Okay. On that point, I feel that Isadora's message and how I received it has been such a gift and my teachers were amazing. And they really gave me a sense of myself and a sense of self-confidence. And I love giving that back out. And I will, whatever I can teach. Actually, they invited me to teach after a little impromptu class after the Battery Dance Festival night that we're performing. Young people might come up on stage and we'll show them some basic moves. I love that. I said yes right away, because it's something I've made a point of. It's just a beautiful reciprocation, what we learn and give back out again.
I love when choreographers allow the audience to participate. I know there's actually a choreographer that does that with Martha Graham, where we come up and we dance. I think it's called Cave. But it's just so wonderful because you're getting into it, and then actually you get to appreciate it by being up there with the dancers and get on a stage and feel like a dancer yourself. So I love that they had you do that.
You love this because one of the things Isadora said is that anyone can dance. And this was something that was not at her time. She changed that because it was only this exclusive perfect bodies that could do this. She said, wait a minute, let's change that equation. Anybody can dance. All dance. She loved folk dance.
On that note, I want you to dance off into the sunset, Lori. Just twirl off the stage. We want to see you do your thing. If you care to, we'll see you move. And if you don't want to move, then we don't need to have you move. But if you feel like moving, we'll watch. We'll be the voyeurs. Inside the She Cave, everything goes on.
I feel constricted. I've already done my dancing. And I love you, and I thank you.
Thank you. Please subscribe to Inside the She Cave, Trailblazers, Innovators, Rule Breakers, wherever you listen to podcasts, including but not limited to Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts. If you prefer to watch, you can visit us on YouTube.